At my sister-in-law's wedding rehearsal dinner, I arrived to find no place setting for me. Bianca, my husband's viciously perfect sister, smirked from the head table. "Oh darling," she purred, "we only reserved seats for important guests." The groom's aristocratic family tittered. My husband shrugged. "Don't make a scene, Hannah." I didn't. I excused myself to freshen up, and set the timer on Bianca's downfall. I knew it was coming the moment Bianca's champagne glass clinked against the Swarovski crystal chandelier. The entire ballroom fell silent, exactly as she'd planned. "A toast," she announced, her voice dripping with false warmth that fooled everyone except those who truly knew her. I tightened my grip on my champagne flute, the stem nearly snapping between my fingers. My husband Victor remained oblivious, his attention caught by some investment banker's joke across the room. Damien Lambert stood proudly at the center of the charity gala he'd organized, the culmination of months of work to benefit children's cancer research. At 65, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who'd built his empire from nothing, unlike my father-in-law Nathaniel Cara, who'd inherited his wealth and multiplied it through connections rather than innovation. To Damien, Bianca continued, her crimson lips curving into what others might mistake for a smile. "I knew better. For bringing us all together tonight. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of calculated revenge and social justice, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps support more tales of those who refuse to remain powerless in the face of cruelty. Now, let's watch as Hannah sets the timer on her sister-in-law's downfall." The crowd murmured appreciatively. The annual Starlight Gala represented the pinnacle of high society in our city, an event where business deals were sealed with handshakes between dessert courses and reputations were made or broken by a single whispered comment. "Though," Bianca added, her voice dropping to a theatrical stage whisper that somehow carried across the marble floor, "I must say the lighting is particularly flattering for you tonight, Damien. It almost disguises that shiny head of yours." A few nervous titters rippled through the crowd. "What did they call you in the Tribune profile last month? The bald eagle of business." She laughed lightly, twirling a lock of her expensively highlighted hair. "Though I've always thought vulture might be more accurate considering how you've circled the Wilcox merger." The laughter stopped. Several investors from the Wilcox deal stood nearby, and Damien's recent acquisition had been controversial but perfectly legal. I watched the color drain from Nathaniel's face as his daughter continued her verbal assault, destroying in seconds the business relationship he'd cultivated for years. "Bianca," I whispered urgently, stepping toward her. "That's enough." She ignored me completely, as she always did. Victor's insignificant wife, the woman who wasn't born into money and therefore would never truly belong in her world. "To our bald vulture," she concluded, raising her glass higher. "May your talons never lose their grip." Silence crashed through the room like a physical wave. I caught Damien's eye across the crowd. The steel in his gaze was unmistakable, cold, calculating, and suddenly very, very dangerous. This wasn't just a social faux pas. This was business suicide. Nathaniel finally moved, crossing the room with remarkable speed for a man his size. "My apologies, Damien," he said loudly, gripping Bianca's elbow with barely disguised fury. "My daughter's sense of humor sometimes exceeds her sense of propriety. She meant no disrespect." "Of course not," Bianca agreed smoothly, though her eyes told a different story. She'd meant every word. The petty revenge for Damien declining her pitch for heading the Lambert Foundation's marketing division last month. She never could handle rejection. "No offense taken," Damien replied, his voice glacial. "Though I'd be careful about birds of prey analogies, Ms. Cara. Even vultures serve a purpose in nature's hierarchy." The orchestra struck up again, desperate to fill the awkward silence. Victor finally appeared at my side, squeezing my hand while completely missing the tension vibrating through the air. "Everything okay?" he asked cheerfully. "Fine," I lied, watching as Nathaniel forced Bianca to approach Damien directly. Her apology was a masterpiece of insincerity. "I'm terribly sorry if my toast came across as inappropriate, Damien. You know how I adore your unique profile." Damien's nod was so stiff it might have cracked. "Of course, Bianca. Your candor has always been your most distinctive quality." That should have been the end of it. A social misstep, smoothed over with practiced politeness. But I'd spent enough time observing the dynamics between these powerful families to recognize the tremor that had just rippled through the foundation of their carefully constructed alliance. "He'll never forgive her," a voice murmured at my elbow. I turned to find Zoe Lambert, Damien's daughter, and, surprisingly, my closest friend in this world of sharks disguised as socialites. Unlike the other trust fund children, Zoe had actually worked her way up in her father's company, starting in the mailroom despite her last name. "Your father has always been gracious," I offered diplomatically. Zoe snorted delicately, steering me toward the terrace doors. "In public, yes. But did you see his eyes?" Outside, the summer night enveloped us in blessed quiet. The city skyline glittered beneath us, the Lambert Tower's distinctive silhouette dominating the view. "Dad's been looking for an exit strategy from your in-laws' business for months," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "This merger with the Hartleys that Nathaniel keeps bragging about. It's built on sand. The only reason Dad hasn't pulled out completely is because of the history between our families." I absorbed this information silently, filing it away like the loaded weapon it was. For 3 years I'd endured Bianca's subtle jabs, her ways of reminding me I would always be an outsider. The scholarship girl who'd somehow snagged the Kara heir but would never truly belong. "Don't repeat that," Zoe added quickly. "Dad would kill me. But I thought you should know." Before I could respond, the terrace doors flew open. Nathaniel emerged, booming with artificial joviality, his arms slung around Damien's stiff shoulders. "The future looks bright, doesn't it, Damien? Once we finalize the Hartley merger next month, we'll dominate the entire eastern seaboard." "Indeed," Damien replied, his smile tight and empty. I noticed how it didn't reach his eyes, the same eyes that had locked with mine earlier, filled with quiet fury. More guests spilled out onto the terrace as the fundraising portion of the evening concluded. Victor found me again, wrapped in his carefree bubble of privilege, utterly unaware of the business apocalypse his sister had nearly triggered. "Dad says we've raised $8 million tonight," he told me proudly. "Bianca's already planning how to leverage it for the wedding publicity." Of course she was. Bianca's upcoming marriage to the Hartley heir had nothing to do with love and everything to do with merging two family empires. I nodded and smiled, playing my part as the supportive wife while inwardly contemplating the web of lies and leverage that held this glittering world together. At precisely 10 o'clock the fireworks began, exploding over the river in brilliant cascades of light. As everyone's faces turned skyward, I made my decision. 3 years of subtle humiliation. 3 years of being the outsider, tolerated but never accepted. 3 years of watching Bianca crush anyone who stood in her way with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced consequences. As the colors burst overhead, illuminating Bianca's perfect profile, I made a silent vow that froze into determination within my chest. She would pay for her arrogance. Not tomorrow, not next week, but when the moment was perfect. I would remember Damien's steel gaze, Zoe's whispered intelligence, and the fault lines running through the Kara family empire. Bianca had no idea that tonight, with one champagne toast and a thoughtless insult, she had sown the seeds of her own destruction. 2 months after the gala, gilt-edged invitations arrived announcing the engagement of Bianca Elizabeth Kara to Mr. Alexander Preston Hartley III. The envelope weighed more than my wedding ring, the paper so thick it nearly qualified as cardboard. Victor brought it home with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Mother says it's going to be the social event of the year," he explained, watching me examine the elaborate calligraphy. "The press coverage alone will boost company stock by 5%. I set the invitation on our kitchen counter. How romantic. Victor missed my sarcasm entirely. "Well, it's not just about romance, is it? The Hartleys control shipping routes we need, and we have the distribution network they've been trying to build for a decade." He kissed my cheek absently. "It's a perfect match. Perfect for everyone except the couple themselves, perhaps." I'd met Alexander Hartley exactly twice. Once at a charity auction where he'd spent the evening glued to his phone, and again at a Christmas party where he'd gotten so drunk he'd called his own sister by the wrong name. Bianca had previously referred to him as that pompous Hartley boor, before suddenly deciding he was the love of her life. The engagement party a week later was held at the Kara family estate, a sprawling mansion with manicured gardens that had been featured in architectural magazines across the globe. I wore emerald green, knowing it would irritate Bianca, who had specifically requested guests wear pastels to complement her blush pink gown. "You look beautiful," Zoe whispered when she found me near the champagne fountain. "And exactly like someone who didn't read the dress code memo." I smiled innocently. Was there a memo? Zoe's laugh drew attention. She looked radiant in a silver dress that matched her prematurely gray hair, a trait she'd inherited from Damien and wore with striking confidence. "Dad sends his regrets," she said, lowering her voice. "Sudden business in Tokyo. How convenient. Isn't it?" Her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Though he did send a rather obscenely expensive vase as an engagement gift. Antique Chinese. Ugliest thing you've ever seen, but worth more than most people's homes." Across the room, Bianca held court, her left hand strategically positioned to catch the light. The diamond on her finger was massive, at least 10 carats, cushion-cut with smaller diamonds forming a halo around it. Alexander stood slightly behind her, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo, his attention repeatedly drifting to his phone. "They look thrilled," I murmured. "Oh, they're ecstatic," Zoe replied dryly. "About the stock options. Did you know the prenup negotiations took longer than their actual courtship?" The evening progressed predictably, elaborate hors d'oeuvres, string quartet playing inoffensive classical pieces and endless champagne. Nathaniel clinked his glass for attention, his face flushed with triumph rather than paternal pride. "To new beginnings," he toasted, his gaze sweeping meaningfully across the assembled business associates rather than focusing on the couple. "And to the joining of two great families and their enterprises." Polite applause followed. I scanned the crowd, noting the mixture of genuine congratulations and calculated networking. My attention caught on Mr. Hartley Sr., standing slightly apart from the celebration. Despite the air conditioning, beads of sweat dotted his forehead as he frantically scrolled through his phone. When he noticed me watching, he quickly pocketed the device and forced a smile. I excused myself from Zoe and drifted toward the bar, positioning myself near enough to overhear his urgent whisper to an associate. "Don't care what we have to liquidate. Just keep it quiet until after the merger announcement next week." I sipped my champagne slowly, mentally filing away this fragment of conversation. The foundation wasn't just cracking, it was beginning to crumble. Later that night, as Victor and I drove home, his usual carefree demeanor had vanished. He gripped the steering wheel with unusual tension, his knuckles white in the darkness. "Is everything okay?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. He hesitated. "Just business stress. Nothing for you to worry about. I'm your wife. If something's bothering you, I want to know." Victor sighed heavily. "It's this merger. If the Hartley deal falls through." He trailed off, then admitted reluctantly, "Dad's leveraged almost everything on this. The wedding, the merger announcement, the expansion plans. It's all tied together. One domino falls, they all fall." I placed my hand over his. "I'm sure it will work out." "Of course it will," he agreed too quickly. "Bianca won't let it fail. She's already got the wedding plan down to the last petal." I didn't mention the sweat on Mr. Hartley's brow or his frantic phone call. Some observations were best kept to myself. 3 days later, Zoe called me at midnight. I slipped out of bed, leaving Victor sleeping deeply, and took the call in our home office. "Hannah, sorry for the late hour, but I thought you should know." Zoe's voice was tight with suppressed excitement. "Dad's reached his breaking point with the Caras. He's liquidating all shares in their joint ventures tomorrow afternoon." My heart raced. "Tomorrow? Are you sure?" "Positive. The paperwork's already drawn up. He's calling Nathaniel at 2 o'clock to break the news." She paused. "It's going to be brutal. The market will react immediately." "What about the Hartley merger?" "That's the thing. It's built entirely on the foundation of our company's partnership. Once Dad pulls out, the whole house of cards collapses." I closed my eyes, visualizing the timing. "The rehearsal dinner is tomorrow night." "Is it?" Zoe feigned innocence poorly. "What unfortunate timing." After we hung up, I sat in the darkened office, possibilities unfolding before me like a chess match reaching its conclusion. 3 years of calculated patience, of watching and waiting, had led to this perfect moment. The pieces were aligned: Bianca's cruelty, Nathaniel's arrogance, and their business built on exploitation rather than innovation. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a number I rarely used. My finger hovered over it briefly before I pressed call. Damien answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the hour. Hannah, is everything all right? Everything's fine, I assured him, my voice steady as a surgeon's hand. I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. What can I do for you? I chose my words carefully. Zoe mentioned you're planning some significant business changes tomorrow. Pause. She shouldn't have shared that information. Probably not, I agreed. But she did. And it got me thinking about timing. Timing. I traced a pattern on my desk, my voice dropping to almost a whisper. What if you moved your timeline up? To tonight? The silence stretched between us, charged with understanding. Tonight, he repeated slowly. During the rehearsal dinner, you mean? I didn't confirm or deny. I didn't need to. Damien's low chuckle held no humor, only recognition of a worthy strategist. You've always seen more than others give you credit for, haven't you, Hannah? I observe, I said simply. And now you want to act. Justice delayed is justice denied, isn't that what they say? Another long pause, then, I'll need to make some calls. Of course. I wouldn't want to keep you. As I prepared to hang up, his voice stopped me. Hannah, why now after all this time? I thought of Bianca's smirk at the gala, of years of subtle dismissals and not-so-subtle humiliations, of being treated as an outsider in my own family. Let's just say I believe in perfect timing. I ended the call and sat motionless in the darkness, the quiet hum of anticipation buzzing beneath my skin. Tomorrow night, Bianca's perfect world would shatter, and I would be there to witness every moment of her downfall. I arrived at the rehearsal dinner the following evening with Victor, dressed in a midnight blue gown that complemented my carefully applied makeup. Nothing too flashy, nothing that would draw attention. Tonight wasn't about me. Tonight I was merely the observer, the invisible catalyst who had set events in motion. The venue, an exclusive restaurant overlooking the city skyline, had been rented out entirely for the occasion. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the gathered elite. The Cara family, the Hartleys, and a carefully curated selection of influential business associates. Bianca had arranged the seating with strategic precision. I noted with grim satisfaction that my place card was tucked between two elderly aunts at the table furthest from the bridal party. I'll have them fix it, Victor offered when he noticed, but I placed a gentle hand on his arm. It's fine, I assured him. I'm happy where I am. And I was. My peripheral position would give me the perfect vantage point to watch the impending catastrophe. I checked my watch discreetly. 7:45 p.m. Damien had confirmed by text that everything was in place. His team had executed the share liquidation with silent efficiency over the past 18 hours. Financial news outlets had been alerted. Time to break the story at precisely 8 p.m., right as Nathaniel would be giving his rehearsal dinner speech. The first course arrived. A delicate arrangement of scallops that I barely tasted. My attention was fixed on the head table, where Bianca preened in a silver-sheathed dress, a diamond necklace catching the light with every movement. It had been a pre-wedding gift from Alexander, though I suspected it was another strategic investment, another piece of collateral in their transaction disguised as romance. At 5 minutes to 8, Nathaniel rose from his seat, champagne glass in hand. The murmur of conversation died down as he cleared his throat. Distinguished guests, beloved family members, he began, his voice carrying the practiced resonance of someone accustomed to boardroom speeches. We gather tonight on the eve of a momentous occasion, not just the union of two people, but the joining of two great legacies. I took a small sip of wine, savoring the moment like the vintage in my glass. Tomorrow, when Bianca and Alexander exchange vows, they will be cementing more than their love. They will be forging the future. A future of prosperity, growth, and... His phone buzzed loudly against the table. Nathaniel frowned, glancing down at the screen. His face remained composed, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. He silenced the device and continued. As I was saying, a future of unprecedented opportunity for... The phone buzzed again. And again. And again. Not just his now but phones throughout the room. The soft chime of notifications created a discordant symphony that drowned out his words. Mr. Hartley was the first to check his device. I watched the blood drain from his face in real time, leaving him ashen under the chandelier light. Nathaniel, he interrupted, his voice strangled. The stock. The rest of his sentence was lost as Nathaniel's phone rang. A distinctive ringtone he used only for his most critical business calls. With a strained smile, he excused himself. "One moment, please. I'm sure it's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Through the glass partition separating the private dining room from the corridor, we could all see Nathaniel's expression transform. Disbelief. Rage. The progression was fascinating to witness, like watching a sculpture crack from within. He reappeared a moment later, face contorted. "What do you mean he's withdrawn?" His scream silenced the orchestra, the glass he'd been holding shattering against the floor. "That's impossible. The paperwork wasn't finalized until next week." The room froze. Bianca's hand flew to her throat, clutching at her diamond necklace as though it suddenly restricted her breathing. "Father." Her voice held a note I'd never heard before, pure fear. Nathaniel didn't respond. He was shouting into his phone, spittle flying from his lips. "Call him back. Tell Lambert he can't do this. The announcement is Monday." The name Lambert rippled through the room. Guests began checking their own phones, gasps and murmurs building into a crescendo of panic. "Cara Industries plummets 43% in after-hours trading," someone read aloud. "Lambert Enterprises severs all ties with Cara Industries, effective immediately," another voice added. "Hartley Global expected to withdraw from merger talks." Mr. Hartley Sr. swayed on his feet, his complexion turning from white to gray to a concerning shade of green. He reached for the table to steady himself, missed, and collapsed face-first into his chocolate soufflé. The chaos that followed was exquisite. Waiters rushed to Mr. Hartley's aid while business associates huddled in corners, frantically calling their brokers. The orchestra, unsure whether to continue playing, awkwardly transitioned to a somber melody that only heightened the sense of disaster. And through it all, Bianca stood statue still, the realization dawning across her perfect features. This wasn't just a business setback. This was the end of everything she'd planned. "The wedding," she whispered, then louder. "The wedding. What about the wedding?" Alexander was already on his phone, his back turned to his fiancée as he barked orders to his financial team. The gesture said everything. When faced with choosing between Bianca and his family's money, there was no contest. Bianca's composure cracked. She lunged at Victor, who had been watching the scene unfold with the same stunned expression as everyone else. "Do something," she screamed, her manicured nails digging into his arm. "Call your contacts. Call someone. This can't be happening." Victor looked helplessly from his sister to his father, who was now slumped in a chair, phone pressed to his ear as he begged his legal team for options. "I don't think there's anything we can do, he said softly. "If Lambert's pulled out. I don't care what he's done." Her voice rose to a pitch that made crystal ring. "Fix it." I remained in my seat, calmly lifting my wine glass to my lips. Our eyes met across the chaos, Bianca's wild with desperation, mine steady with satisfaction. For just a moment, a flash of suspicion crossed her face, quickly replaced by renewed panic as Alexander's father regained consciousness only to immediately begin calling his broker. By midnight the restaurant had emptied. The Hartleys had departed en masse, Alexander trailing behind his family without so much as a goodbye to his fiancée. Business associates had melted away, eager to distance themselves from the imploding Cara empire. Only the immediate family remained, shell-shocked in the aftermath. Victor and I returned to the Cara estate with Nathaniel and Bianca. The house, which had been transformed with floral arrangements for tomorrow's garden ceremony, now felt like a funeral parlor. Bianca disappeared upstairs while Nathaniel locked himself in his study with a bottle of scotch. Dawn broke with the inevitable announcement. The wedding was cancelled. I found Bianca in her room, surrounded by wedding gifts that would now be returned. Her designer gown hung on the closet door, mockingly perfect in its ivory splendor. She wasn't wearing makeup, her hair tangled from a sleepless night. When she looked up, her eyes were red-rimmed, but I knew, just as I knew the sun would rise, that she wasn't crying for love. She was crying for the empire that had slipped through her fingers, for the status she'd lost, for the future that had evaporated in a single evening. "Are you happy now?" she whispered hoarsely. I leaned against the doorframe. Why would I be happy about your wedding being cancelled? Her laugh was bitter hollow. Don't pretend. I saw your face last night. You enjoyed every second. I didn't deny it. Some truths didn't need to be spoken aloud to be perfectly understood. I left Bianca's room without responding to her accusation. There was nothing to say. We both knew what had happened even if she didn't understand exactly how I'd orchestrated it. In the hallway, I nearly collided with Victor, who looked like he hadn't slept at all. "Dad's in his study," he said, his voice rough. "He's been on the phone with Damian Lambert all night." I nodded, feigning sympathy. "Any progress?" Victor ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "None. Lambert won't budge. Dad's offered everything. Increased shares, board positions, even naming rights on the new headquarters." "And Damian's response?" "He just keeps referring to some formal letter his legal team sent over." Victor leaned against the wall, suddenly looking older than his 32 years. "Apparently it states, effective immediately, all ties are severed. No negotiation, no transition period. Just done." From downstairs came the sound of something shattering, Nathaniel's temper finding a physical outlet. I winced, not entirely acting. The house had been in the Cara family for generations, its antiques and artwork worth millions. Nathaniel's rage would only compound their losses. "The stock is still falling," Victor continued, checking his phone. "Down 62% now. The business press is calling it Black Friday, even though it's Tuesday." He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. "We're ruined, Hannah." I placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Not ruined. Changed maybe. You don't understand. Everything, the house, the vacation properties, even our personal accounts, it's all tied to company stock and assets. Dad leveraged everything for the Hartley merger." "Everything?" I asked, genuine surprise coloring my voice. I'd anticipated financial damage but not complete devastation. Victor nodded grimly. "The prenup negotiations took so long because Dad was hiding our liquidity issues. The Hartleys wanted guarantees we couldn't actually provide without the merger itself." Another crash from downstairs punctuated his words. We both glanced toward the sound, then back at each other. "You should get some rest," I suggested gently. "Tomorrow will be difficult enough." "Tomorrow?" Victor laughed hollowly. "Tomorrow we start selling assets to pay creditors. Tomorrow the board meets to discuss whether Dad should step down. Tomorrow our lawyers meet with the SEC to address insider trading allegations someone has mysteriously filed." I kept my expression neutral. The SEC complaint had been Zoe's idea, a detail I hadn't known about until it was already done. As Victor turned to go, he paused, studying my face with unexpected intensity. "You knew this would happen." It wasn't a question. His eyes, so like his father's but warmer, more perceptive, held mine steadily. In that moment, I realized he'd always been more observant than his family gave him credit for. "Not exactly," I replied carefully. "Not the scale of it. But you knew something." He stepped closer. "When Dad announced the merger, you didn't seem surprised at all when it collapsed. You were ready." I maintained his gaze, neither confirming nor denying. After a long moment, a strange expression crossed his face. Not anger or betrayal, but something like respect. "Remind me never to underestimate you," he said quietly, then continued down the hall to his old bedroom. The next week unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Spectacular, devastating, and impossible to look away from. The business press documented every painful detail of what they dubbed the Cara collapse. Investors filed lawsuits. The board forced Nathaniel to resign. The family's private jet was seized by creditors mid-flight, forcing them to return to New York on a commercial airline, in economy. Bianca's social death was perhaps the most fascinating to witness. The same friends who had vied for spots in her wedding party suddenly couldn't return her calls. Invitations to galas and charity events mysteriously stopped arriving. Her social media accounts, once filled with fawning comments, became ghost towns overnight. I accompanied Victor to their family lawyer's office 10 days after the rehearsal dinner disaster. The stately conference room felt like a funeral parlor as the attorney outlined their options. None of them pleasant. "The Manhattan apartment must be sold immediately," he explained, sliding documents across the polished table. "As well as the Hamptons property and the vineyard in Napa. Nathaniel, diminished in a rumpled suit, merely nodded. Bianca, however, wasn't accepting defeat so easily. "What about my personal assets?" she demanded. "My jewelry collection is insured for $8 million. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I'm afraid most of your collection was purchased with corporate funds or through company accounts. Those items have already been inventoried for liquidation." "That's impossible." Bianca slammed her palm on the table. "My diamond parure was a gift from father." "A gift purchased through the company as a tax write-off," the lawyer corrected gently. "The documentation is quite clear." When we left the meeting, Bianca was still arguing, her voice rising to a pitch that made the receptionist wince. Victor and I stepped into the elevator in silence. "Will you stay?" he asked suddenly as the doors closed. "With me, I mean. Now that." He gestured vaguely, encompassing the situation. I took his hand. "Do you think I married you for your money? I wouldn't blame you if you had." His smile was sad. "It's what everyone else wanted from us." "I'm not everyone else." The truth was more complicated. I hadn't married Victor for his money, but I hadn't married him for love either. Not at first. I'd married him because he was kind when his family was cruel, because he saw me when they looked through me. Love had grown later, quiet and steady. Now, watching him face his family's downfall with dignity, I realized that love had deepened into something genuine. 2 days later, Zoe invited me to lunch at a discreet restaurant far from the financial district. "To the architect of the most elegant revenge I've ever witnessed," she said, raising her water glass in a toast. "I never thought you had it in you." I smiled faintly. "I had excellent help. Dad only provided the opportunity. You recognized the perfect moment to strike." From her handbag she withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I brought you something." Inside lay a strand of perfect South Sea pearls. I recognized them immediately. Bianca had worn them to my wedding, commenting loudly about their value compared to my modest diamond pendant. "How did you?" "They were part of the asset seizure. Dad's company acquired them in the liquidation, and he thought you might appreciate them." Zoe's smile was wicked. "A trophy for the real winner." We shared a conspiratorial laugh, though mine felt hollow. Revenge, I was discovering, wasn't quite as satisfying as I'd imagined. It didn't erase the years of slights and humiliations. It didn't heal old wounds, it merely balanced the scales. The following weekend I visited the Cara estate one last time. Movers were packing up the last of the family's belongings before the property went to auction. Bianca was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had it she'd accepted a distant cousin's offer of a guest house in Connecticut until she got back on her feet. In the master suite, the safe stood open and empty, save for a few pieces of jewelry deemed Nathaniel's personal property. I recognized several items he'd given Bianca over the years, pieces she'd flaunted at every opportunity. With the movers distracted downstairs, I gathered these remaining items: a diamond tennis bracelet, sapphire earrings, an emerald pendant, and slipped them into my purse. Not to keep, but for a purpose that felt like closing a circle. That evening, I made an anonymous donation to the children's cancer charity that had hosted the gala where this all began. The accompanying note specified that the jewelry be auctioned at their next fundraiser. The irony was delicious. Bianca's symbols of status would now fund the cause she'd used merely as a backdrop for her social climbing. As I walked away from the courier service, I felt a weight lift. The Cara Empire had fallen, but from its ashes, something more honest might emerge. For Nathaniel, perhaps humility. For Bianca, maybe self-awareness. For Victor, definitely freedom from his family's toxic expectations. And for me, a quiet triumph, yes, but also closure. The scales had balanced. Justice, cold and precise, had been served. 3 weeks after the Cara Empire's collapse, Victor and I moved into a modest brownstone in Brooklyn, a far cry from the penthouse we'd once shared. The building needed work, the hardwood floors scuffed from previous tenants, but sunlight streamed through tall windows, warming the empty rooms with promise. It was the first property either of us had owned that wasn't connected to the family fortune. "It's small," Victor said apologetically as we carried in our first boxes. "It's ours," I corrected him. "Really ours." We were building a new life from scratch. Victor had accepted a teaching position at a business school, a significant step down in prestige and salary from his former executive role, but his eyes had lit up when describing the opportunity to shape young minds without his father's shadow looming over him. I was surprised when Nathaniel asked to visit us a month after we'd settled in. He arrived looking like a different man. His designer suit replaced by khakis and a simple button-down, his luxury watch gone, his bearing less commanding but somehow more authentic. "Nice place," he said, glancing around our living room. No snide remarks, no backhanded compliments, just a simple observation. Victor had been called to the university for an emergency faculty meeting, leaving Nathaniel and me alone with a pot of coffee between us. The silence stretched uncomfortably until he cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology, Hannah." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "When Victor first brought you home, I saw you as—" He paused, searching for words. "Beneath you," I supplied. He nodded, surprising me with his honesty. "I was wrong. You were the only one who saw us clearly. Who saw Bianca clearly." His mention of his daughter sent a pang of something, not quite guilt but close, through me. I'd orchestrated their downfall without remorse, but sitting across from this humbled version of Nathaniel Cara, I found myself wondering about the human cost. "How is she?" I asked. Nathaniel looked down at his coffee cup. "Struggling. She hasn't adjusted well to reduced circumstances." "I imagine not. Her cousin Marcus offered her a teaching position at that finishing school he runs in Switzerland." Nathaniel's laugh held no humor. "Bianca teaching etiquette. The irony isn't lost on me. At 28, Bianca was essentially being sent to the equivalent of boarding school, a glorified exile wrapped as an opportunity." "I indulged her too much," Nathaniel admitted quietly. "From the time she was little after her mother died. I thought giving her everything she wanted would make up for what she'd lost. I could have offered comfort, could have said what parents so often want to hear, that they did their best. But some lessons need to hurt to truly teach." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You did." He nodded, accepting the unvarnished truth with surprising grace. We finished our coffee in silence, and when he left, his shoulders seemed straighter, as though unburdened by the weight of pretense he'd carried for so long. That night, Victor returned home late, smelling of chalk dust and coffee. I was already in bed, reading by lamplight. He sat beside me, taking the book from my hands and setting it aside. "Dad told me about your conversation," he said. "Did he?" Victor nodded. "He also told me something interesting. Apparently, Damian Lambert approached him 2 years ago about splitting their business ventures amicably. Dad refused, tried to leverage the partnership for more control instead." "That sounds like Nathaniel," I agreed. "The thing is," Victor continued, studying my face, "Lambert specifically mentioned concerns about how Bianca treated you at family functions. He said it reminded him of how his late wife was treated by her in-laws." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart raced. "That's interesting. Dad thought it was a negotiation tactic at the time." Victor traced my cheekbone with his thumb. "But now he wonders if Lambert was waiting for the right moment, or the right person, to give him a reason to sever ties." His eyes held mine, searching. "You didn't just make a phone call that night, did you? You've been playing a longer game." I didn't answer immediately. The truth was complicated. I hadn't planned everything from the beginning, but I'd been collecting information, building relationships, waiting for an opportunity. "Does it matter now?" I asked softly. "No," he said after a moment. "Except that I'm realizing I never really knew you." His smile held a mixture of awe and wariness. "You're terrifying, and I love you for it." He kissed me then, and something shifted between us. The last pretenses falling away, leaving something raw and honest in their place. Our marriage, built initially on convenience and attraction, had transformed through crisis into something deeper, stronger for having been tested. The following morning, a courier delivered a small package addressed to me. Inside was a handwritten note on heavy stationery, accompanied by a vintage fountain pen in a leather case. "Hannah, this pen belonged to my father, who built our company from nothing. He taught me that true power comes not from wealth or status, but from patience and precision. You remind me of him. Your father would be proud. Regards, Damian Lambert." Coming from Damian, a man known for his restraint with compliments, the note felt like the highest praise. My father, a professor of ethics who died before I met Victor, had indeed valued integrity above all else. He'd be conflicted about my methods perhaps, but would have understood the justice at their core. I was turning the pen in my hands when my phone rang. Zoe, calling from her father's office where she'd taken on a more prominent role since the car collapse. "Are we still on for lunch tomorrow?" she asked without preamble. "Of course. The usual place." "Perfect." She paused. "I heard Bianca's off to Switzerland. Teaching at a finishing school of all things." "So I've heard." Zoe's laugh filtered through the phone. "I'd pay good money to see Bianca Cara teaching anyone manners." We chatted briefly about Damien's health, excellent, her new responsibilities, challenging but fulfilling, and Victor's teaching position, surprisingly satisfying. As we were about to hang up, her tone shifted. "Hannah, one thing." "Yes. What you did, it was justified. Necessary even." Her voice grew serious. "But be careful." "Of what?" "Of becoming what you hated." The warning was gentle but clear. Revenge can reshape you if you're not careful. After we hung up, I opened my jewelry box, finding the diamond earrings I'd kept from Bianca's collection. Not to wear, not to sell, but as a reminder. I turned them in the light, watching prisms dance across the wall. Zoe was right. The line between justice and vindictiveness was thin, easily crossed. I had orchestrated Bianca's downfall with the precision of a surgeon, but I didn't want her cruelty to become my own. I closed the box but didn't discard the earrings. Some reminders were necessary, not of victory, but of the vigilance required to prevent becoming the very thing you'd fought against. 6 months passed. Winter thawed into spring, bringing new growth to the potted plants on our Brooklyn brownstone's modest balcony. The city seemed different now. Or perhaps I was the one who had changed, viewing life through a lens no longer tinted by the Cara family's toxic influence. Victor thrived in academia, his natural charm and genuine interest in his students earning him popularity among both faculty and undergraduates. I'd occasionally pass by his classroom to find him gesturing animatedly, his students leaning forward in their seats, actually engaged, not merely performing interest to curry favor with a Cara heir. One evening, as we walked home from dinner at a neighborhood bistro, Victor surprised me with an unexpected proposal. "I had lunch with Damien Lambert today," he said casually. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh. He's interested in backing a new venture." Victor squeezed my hand. "With us." The idea was both thrilling and terrifying, starting our own firm, independent of the Cara legacy but with Lambert's strategic support. A week later we met Damien at his penthouse office. The city spread beneath us like a glittering tapestry. "The landscape has changed," Damien explained, spreading documents across his desk. "There's a void where Cara Industries once stood. A void that values ethics over expansion." "You think we can fill that void?" I asked. Damien's smile was shrewd. "I think you already have the blueprint for it." He was right. During my years observing the Cara business model, I'd mentally catalogued everything they did wrong. The corners cut, the relationships leveraged to breaking, the employees treated as disposable. I'd imagined how things could be done differently, more sustainably. "We'd need to start small," Victor cautioned. "Small but significant." I agreed, ideas already flowering. "Focus on sustainable investments, transparent practices. Build something that can't be toppled by one bad merger or a single stock plunge." Damien leaned back, watching us with thinly veiled amusement. "I knew you two would find your footing. When can you start?" And just like that, Horizon Partners was born, named for the new vista opening before us. We leased a modest office in a converted industrial building, hired a small team of analysts who valued innovation over intimidation, and began building relationships with clients who shared our vision. Meanwhile, across town, another phoenix was rising from the ashes of the Cara collapse. Nathaniel, humbled but resilient, had started a one-man consultancy operating from a converted guest house on his brother's property. His client list was short but growing. Small businesses that would never have rated his attention in his previous life. "He's different," Victor remarked after visiting his father. "Still driven, but the sharp edges are gone. He's actually listening to people now." I nodded, having witnessed the transformation myself during a surprisingly pleasant dinner where Nathaniel had sought my advice on a client proposal. He was earning respect the hard way now, through competence and character rather than connections and capital. 8 months into our new venture, an envelope arrived with a Swiss postmark. No return address, no note inside. Just a postcard featuring a photograph of the Starlight Gala where everything had begun. I recognized the shot immediately. It captured Bianca mid-toast, champagne glass raised, the moment before she had publicly humiliated Damien. Victor found me staring at it in our home office. "From Bianca?" he asked, recognizing his sister's distinctive handwriting on the address. I nodded. "No message." He studied the image. "What do you think it means?" I traced the edge of the postcard. "Recognition maybe. Understanding." The photograph represented the beginning of her downfall. A moment of arrogance that had triggered a cascade of consequences. By sending it, she acknowledged the symmetry, the justice of what had followed. I framed the postcard and placed it on my desk at Horizon Partners. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that actions, however small, create ripples that eventually return to their source. Nearly a year after the car collapse, Zoe invited us to dinner at an exclusive rooftop restaurant. She arrived looking radiant, her gray hair elegantly styled, wearing a power suit that somehow managed to convey both authority and approachability. To the new CEO of Lambert Enterprises, Victor toasted, raising his glass. Zoe's smile was brilliant. "Dad's not fully retiring, of course. He'll remain chairman of the board, but day-to-day operations are mine now." It was a meteoric rise, though anyone who knew Zoe understood it was earned through years of diligent work rather than nepotism. Damien hadn't handed her the company, he'd prepared her to earn it. "Your idea for integrating Horizon Partners as our strategic development arm is brilliant," she told me over dessert. The board approved it unanimously. The partnership would expand our reach exponentially while maintaining our independence. The perfect balance of growth and control. As we discussed details, I marveled at how naturally Zoe wore her new authority. She'd always been kind, but now her kindness was backed by the kind of power usually reserved for those who'd sacrificed their humanity to obtain it. "By the way," she added as we were preparing to leave, "I'm getting married." The announcement was so casual I almost missed it. "What? To whom?" "James Porter." She blushed slightly. "He teaches literature at Columbia. We met at a fundraiser last fall. Not a business merger, not a strategic alliance. Just love, simple and unencumbered by ulterior motives." The wedding was planned for summer, intimate and understated despite Zoe's wealth and position. No corporate sponsorships disguised as floral arrangements. No business deals sealed between ceremony and reception. On a perfect June day, we gathered in the sculpture garden of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Zoe glowed in a sleek ivory sheath, her hand steady in her father's as he walked her down the aisle. Damien, showing his age now but still formidable, beamed with naked pride. "Never thought I'd see the day," he murmured to me at the reception. "A Lambert marrying for love instead of leverage." I watched as Zoe and James shared their first dance, their movements perfectly synchronized despite having taken no lessons. "Times are changing. Thanks in no small part to you," Damien acknowledged, raising his glass slightly. As the evening progressed, I found myself standing with Zoe near the fountain, both of us slightly apart from the celebration, observing the happiness we'd helped create. "Remember when we met?" she asked. "At that awful Christmas party where Bianca accidentally spilled red wine on your white dress?" I laughed softly. "How could I forget? You appeared with club soda and a knowing look." "I recognized a kindred spirit," Zoe admitted. "Someone who saw through the facade but played the game anyway." She glanced around at the gathered guests, genuine friends rather than strategic connections. "Look where it got us." I followed her gaze to Victor, deep in conversation with James about some obscure literary theory, his face animated with genuine interest. To Nathaniel, showing photos of his community garden project to a retired judge. To Damien, contentedly watching his daughter's happiness. "Karma doesn't forget addresses," I whispered, an old saying of my father's that seemed particularly apt. Zoe squeezed my hand. "Neither do friends." As the orchestra struck up another waltz, Victor appeared at my side, hand extended in invitation. I stepped into his arms, moving across the floor with the ease of partners who had weathered storms together and emerged stronger. The past was behind us. The future, bright with possibility, unfurled before us like the path of moonlight on water. Illuminated, inviting and entirely our own.